Okay, moving in to the brown algae. It is from phylum Phaeophyta, and brown algae has about 1,500 species. And one of the things that is so unique about brown algae is how large it is. And I'm sure that you may have encountered it, especially if you've been to California, because we commonly know our brown algae as kelp. Brown algae has chlorophyll A and B, but the accessory pigment is called fucoxanthin, and that pigment is a secondary pigment that's actually giving algae its brown color. It's also this pigment that is responsible for transferring the light up to the primary chlorophyll molecules. Now, it stores its food. This is different. It's got a carbohydrate called laminarin. And laminarin is a starch, but you would have to look at the molecular makeup of it to see that it is glucose units hooked together, but they're hooked a little bit differently than most of our starches are. So that's going to be a little bit different in the way they're storing their food. They're mostly marine. These include some of the seaweeds, but mostly we refer to them as kelp. And they're very common along the coast, rocky coast where the ocean is cool. So again, I mentioned California because the water there is always really pretty cool. And it's got much more of a rocky coast than the Florida side of it or the East Coast side of it. It definitely can get to great lengths, and a lot of times, if you've ever been swimming in California, kelp beds, the seaweed gets very long. It can actually wrap around you. I know this that some seals and otters will wrap themselves in kelp, and it allows them to float so that they can actually sleep and not go drifting off, or while they're trying to secure food. Also, small fish hide in kelp beds, and the larger fish, like the sharks, know that, and they tend to hunt that. So I would not suggesting ever swimming in kelp beds. Now, there's a few species. I don't know if you've ever seen this or not. These are usually more up north, like towards Oregon. Sorry. But it's called sargassum, and this is a type of algae that forms dense mats. And you can see from the picture, it's not individual thallus type blades, but it makes an overall mat. And it's very nutritious. Brown algae is very nutritious. And a lot of times you can buy it in the health food store along with the green algae because it has a lot of nutrients and minerals that our cells can benefit from. This is more a typical picture here on the right of kelp beds. If you ever get the chance, guys, go to the Santa Monica Aquarium in Santa Monica, California, because it is the most beautiful aquarium. I love, love, love aquariums. And when you see the kelp, it's unbelievable how tall and big this seaweed can grow. So Phaeophyta does have some of the largest known of the algae in this particular kingdom. The very largest is called Macrocystis porifera. It's giant kelp, and you find it in the intertidal zones, and it can reach 60 meters in length. So you can see at this picture, we're looking down towards the bottom of it, but if you look up towards the light, that's how tall this kelp really is. And sometimes when you look at history and they talk about, ships going down and people drowning, it was because they got caught up in this kelp and they panicked. They thought something had them. I've been in kelp beds before, and I can tell you when it kind of wraps around your leg, it does startle you. And if you didn't know it, and if it certainly were at nighttime, you would think that something had you, and you would tend to panic and drown, and that's what happened a lot. Macrocystis pyrifera, if you look at it, the thallus is anchored to the bottom by a root-like what's called a holdfast. Now, guys, the thallus is just an undifferentiated body of a fungus. Okay, it's not leaf, stem, or root. So they use the term thallus as just the body of the fungus that's undifferentiated. The stem-like portion that's running up through it is called the stipe. And then the portion going off of the stipe is actually called the blade. And the blade is where the chloroplasts are with the pigments, and that's where photosynthesis is taking place. So the thallus is actually the stipe and the blade together. If you're talking about the undifferentiated body, we mean that there is not true root, stems, or leaves. And I think it's confusing sometimes when biologists talk about a thallus and then they get caught up in the terminology, because there are parts of that thallus with the stem portion being the stipe and the leaf portion being the blade. So the holdfast is what we would think of as a root, but it doesn't go way down into the sand. If you've ever been around these things, you can pull them up pretty easily, but they're anchoring it to the bottom. But if you know that the bottom sediment is mostly sand, so it's not a true root, it's just a holdfast. And then, of course, you have the thallus that rises up. All right, the cell walls of brown algae contain alginic acid, and this has got a good commercial use. It's a polysaccharide, and it's used in cosmetics. There are many lipsticks that contain it, and lip balms. There's various medication, various drugs. It can be used as a thickening agent, so sometimes you see it in ice creams and salad dressings. And then in textiles, you see it there as well, and in medical dressing. So alginic acid has got a lot of uses, and it is in great concentration in brown algae. So just like red algae has its uses, green algae has its uses, so does brown. All right, winding it up, phylum Phaeophyta, its common name is brown algae. I would more likely say that the common name is kelp, if I ask. The body plan is multicellular. The primary pigments are A and B, but fucoxanthin is its accessory pigment that's given it the brown color. It is a phototroph, meaning that it's capable of making its own food. It's photosynthetic. And if I ask you for one, you can give me sargassum. You can give me the other scientific name if you want, but sargassum is perfectly fine.